They say that dogs don't understand time. They say they don't know what an hour is, or a week, or a year. They say they live only in the moment. But anyone who has ever loved a dog knows that this isn't true. A dog knows exactly what time is. They know the time you leave for work. They know the time you usually come home. And they definitely know the difference between a trip to the grocery store and a departure that feels like forever. This is the story of a bond that stretched across oceans, across war zones, and across 400 days of silence. It is the story of a broken dog named Buster and the soldier who saved him, only to leave him behind. But mostly it is a story about the promise of return, and the incredible, unbreakable loyalty that kept two souls alive when they were thousands of miles apart. To understand the reunion, you first have to understand the rescue. Sergeant Michael Davis wasn't looking for a dog, he was barely keeping himself together. He had just returned from his first deployment, and the silence of his empty apartment was louder than any explosion he had heard overseas. He was dealing with the ghosts that follow many soldiers home. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't relax. He felt constantly on edge, scanning the perimeter of his own living room for threats that weren't there. One rainy Tuesday, on a whim, he drove to the local animal shelter. He didn't know why. He just needed to be somewhere that wasn't his quiet apartment. He walked past the rows of kennels, past the barking, jumping dogs that were begging for attention. And then, in the very last cage, he saw him. He wasn't jumping. He wasn't barking. He was pressed as far back into the corner as he could go, facing the concrete wall. He was a large, scruffy mix, maybe part shepherd, part something else, with matted brown fur and a scar running down his left flank. The shelter volunteer told Michael that the dog's name was Buster, and that he was unadoptable. He had been returned 3 times. He was terrified of loud noises. He was terrified of men. He didn't play. He didn't eat much. He was just waiting for the end. Michael looked at the dog shivering in the corner, and he saw a reflection of himself. He saw a soul that had seen too much, a spirit that was tired of fighting. He knelt down by the cage and whispered, "It's okay, buddy. I get it. I'm tired too." Buster turned his head, just an inch. He looked at Michael with eyes that were ancient and sad, but for the first time in weeks, he didn't growl. That day, Michael didn't leave alone. He signed the papers for the unadoptable dog and lifted him into his truck. The first month was hard. Buster spent most of his time hiding under the kitchen table. Michael spent most of his time sitting on the floor next to him, just reading books aloud so Buster could get used to his voice. They were 2 broken pieces trying to fit together. But slowly the healing began. It started with a paw on a knee, then a head resting on a foot. Then finally, the first night, Buster jumped up onto the bed and curled up against Michael's back. For the first time in a year, Michael slept through the night without nightmares. Buster became his shadow. He became his anchor. When Michael felt the anxiety rising, Buster would sense it before it even happened. He would nudge Michael's hand, demanding pets, grounding him back in reality. They saved each other. They built a world where it was just the 2 of them, against everything else. But military life is cruel. Just as they were finding their rhythm, just as Buster started to wag his tail and play with toys, the orders came. Deployment. Michael was being sent back overseas for 12 months. The packing process was heartbreaking. Dogs know when suitcases come out. They know what it means. Buster started pacing. He started whining, a high-pitched sound of distress that broke Michael's heart. He wouldn't leave Michael's side. He sat on the pile of uniforms, refusing to move, looking at Michael with eyes that asked, "Are you leaving me too? Everyone else left me. Please don't go." On the final morning, Michael knelt down and held Buster's face in his hands. He pressed his forehead against the dog's forehead. He memorized the smell of his fur, the rough texture of his tongue, the warmth of his breath. "Listen to me," Michael whispered, his voice cracking. "I am coming back, I promise. You have to wait for me. You have to be a good boy and wait. I will never abandon you." He left Buster with his parents, who had a big yard, and promised to take good care of him. But as Michael walked away, getting into the taxi that would take him to the base, he heard Buster howl. It wasn't a bark, it was a mournful, long cry that echoed down the street. Michael didn't look back. He couldn't. If he had looked back, he never would have left. The year that followed was the longest year of their lives. For Michael, overseas was a blur of dust, heat, and danger. But every night, in his bunk, he looked at a photo taped to the wall. It wasn't a photo of a girlfriend or a wife. It was a photo of Buster, sitting in the grass, smiling with a tennis ball in his mouth. That photo was his lifeline. When the days were hard, when the missions were dangerous, Michael would touch that photo and whisper, "I'm coming, buddy. Just wait." For Buster, time moved differently. Michael's parents tried their best. They gave him treats. They took him for walks. They bought him expensive beds. But Buster was grieving. For the first 2 months, he sat by the front door for 8 hours a day. He would stare at the knob, waiting for it to turn, waiting for the sound of Michael's truck. Every time a car drove past, his ears would perk up and then droop when the car didn't stop. He lost weight. He stopped playing with his toys. The sparkle in his amber eyes dimmed. He was functioning, but he wasn't living. He was simply existing, holding on to that last promise. He slept on Michael's old sweatshirt, which his parents had kept unwashed in a plastic bag to preserve the scent. Buster would bury his nose in that sweatshirt and let out long, heavy sighs. He was a dog in mourning for a person who was still alive. Technology helped, but it was also confusing. Once a week, Michael would video call his parents. They would put the iPad in front of Buster. "Buster, hey boy," Michael would call out from the screen, his voice tinny and distorted. Buster would hear the voice. He would look around the room frantically, checking behind the sofa, checking the hallway, trying to find where Michael was hiding. He would sniff the iPad, confused why it sounded like Michael but smelled like plastic and glass. He would whine at the screen, licking the glass, trying to taste his best friend. It was bittersweet. It gave Buster hope, but it also refreshed the pain of his absence. Winter came, then spring, then summer. 400 days. That is 9,600 hours. That is a lifetime for a dog. Then finally the day came. Michael landed on American soil. He was exhausted, jet-lagged, and smelled like airplane fuel and stale coffee. But he didn't care. He didn't want to sleep. He didn't want a hot meal. He wanted one thing. He wanted his dog. He coordinated the surprise with his parents. They were in the backyard having a barbecue. They told Buster nothing, of course, but animals have a sixth sense. That morning, Buster had been restless. He had been pacing the fence line, sniffing the wind, sensing a shift in the universe. Michael parked his truck a block away so Buster wouldn't hear the engine. He walked the rest of the way on foot. His heart was hammering in his chest harder than it ever had in combat. What if Buster didn't remember him? What if the bond was broken? What if the time apart had been too long? He walked quietly through the side gate. He hid behind the large oak tree in the backyard. His parents were sitting on the patio. Buster was lying in the grass, his head on his paws, looking bored and sad, staring at a squirrel he didn't have the energy to chase. Michael took a deep breath. He stepped out from behind the tree. He didn't say a word. He just stood there. The wind shifted. It carried Michael's scent across the yard, the scent of his specific soap, his skin, the scent of home. Buster's head snapped up. His nose twitched. Once, twice. He froze. It was as if he had seen a ghost. He slowly stood up, his body stiff, his eyes locked on the figure standing across the yard. He didn't run immediately. He couldn't believe it. He had waited so long that he was afraid it was a dream. Michael crouched down and opened his arms. "Buster," he choked out. "I'm home." That was the trigger. Buster didn't just run, he exploded. He launched himself across the yard like a missile. He covered the distance in 3 seconds, slamming into Michael with so much force that he knocked the soldier onto his back in the grass. And then, pure chaos ensued. Buster was crying, a sound halfway between a bark and a scream of joy. He was licking Michael's face, his tears, his hands, knocking his hat off. His tail was wagging so hard his entire body was shaking. He was running circles around Michael, then diving back in for more hugs, then running another circle, as if he needed to burn off the adrenaline of happiness. Michael was laughing and crying at the same time, burying his face in Buster's fur, breathing in the smell of his dog. "I told you," he kept saying over and over. "I told you I'd come back. I promised." The parents watched with tears streaming down their faces. They had seen Buster depressed for a year. They had seen him staring at the door, and now they saw the light turn back on in his eyes. The dog that had been unadoptable, the dog that had been broken, was whole again. For the next hour, Buster would not let go of Michael. If Michael stood up, Buster stood up. If Michael sat down, Buster sat on his lap. He kept checking, sniffing Michael's arm, making sure he was real, making sure he wasn't going to vanish again. That night was the first night in 400 days that the house was truly quiet. There was no pacing, no whining at the door, no staring at the wall. Michael lay in his bed, exhausted but at peace, and there, curled up against his back, heavy and warm, was Buster. Buster was snoring softly, twitching in his sleep, probably chasing rabbits in his dreams. But every few minutes, even in deep sleep, he would stretch out a paw and touch Michael's leg, just checking, just making sure. They say dogs don't understand time. Maybe they don't understand clocks or calendars. But they understand waiting, they understand absence, and most importantly, they understand the promise of return. Buster and Michael are inseparable now. They go everywhere together. They are making up for lost time, one walk, one game of fetch, and one nap at a time. The scar on Buster's flank is still there, a reminder of his past. The memories of war are still in Michael's head, a reminder of his service. But the loneliness is gone. This story is a reminder to all of us. It is a reminder of the sacrifices our soldiers make, leaving behind everything they love to serve a greater cause. But it is also a reminder of the silent heroes who wait for them at home. The ones who don't understand why their human left, but who keep watch by the door every single day, holding on to hope with a loyalty that humans can only aspire to. If you're watching this, go hug your dog. Tell them you love them, because to them you are their entire world. And if you have ever had to leave a pet behind, tell us your story in the comments. How did they react when you came home? Every reunion is a miracle. Every wagging tail is a victory. Thank you for watching Buster and Michael's story. If this video made you smile, or cry, or hug your pet a little tighter, please like and subscribe to the Second Chance Sanctuary. We have so many more stories to tell, and we can't do it without you. Welcome home, Michael. And good boy, Buster. Good boy.